All right, so this video specifically is dedicated to my buddy who's inheriting my three vessel brew system. You don't see the mash tun here, it's already cleaned and put away. But if you watch this video, you'll watch me make this exact beer. Um, this is how I do it. I don't have a brew sculpture or any pumps or anything. It's rather primitive. I just do it off of this one step here outside my front door. Um, So if anybody's struggling with how to brew with a three vessel system, I don't think there's a whole lot of videos on YouTube out there, but this is how I do it. This is more of an art form rather than the science. People have been brewing beer for thousands of years, literal millennia. So if you make something drinkable, then that's a success in my book. Um, but besides that, there's a few general practices like keeping everything very clean. I use Star San and One Step, which is right there, to clean and sanitize. But aside from that, well, the kettle's your oyster, I guess. This is the program I use here. I use Brewfather. Here's all the other recipes I've made or found. Um, you can find recipes under the library tab. They have a lot of cool stuff here, submitted by other users. And you can click it, copy it to your profile, etc. But going back up to recipes here, I'm going to make one to show you how to use this program. So I'm going to go up to the top right here, add recipe, and this is going to be an orange wit beer for my graduation. And I'm kind of making this one up from a few other recipes. So I have no idea if this is going to be good or not. This is my profile name, obvious fake name here. I guess I'll leave that since I'll be posting this to YouTube. Up here, I have my equipment. You can edit this equipment profile, make your own, change it to something else. If you find yours here, great. Mine's kind of a thrown together system. Needs some improvements to my profile, which you'll see later as I'm brewing. But you can select your profile here for your equipment. I'm using an all grain recipe. You can change this to partial mash, extract, etc. Here's some estimated values it's going to have: pre-boil volume, brew house efficiency, etc. These will come into play later as I actually brew. But to make the recipe, I'm going to start with fermentables. The first one is going to be 4 pounds of Viking Pilsner malt. So as I search for it, I'll find it here, and I'll add 4 pounds. I use their stock values here. I have no idea if this is accurate to my actual stuff, but I hope it's as close as possible to the real thing. It probably changes based on crop yields, etc. But this is close enough for me. I'm no professional here. So I'm going to save that. 4 pounds of Viking Pilsner. I'm going to add another one. This is going to be Grease red wheat malt. I'm going to do 4 pounds of that as well. And I also have 1 pound of flaked oats. I can't remember who makes the flaked oats, so I'm just going to pick one. This one sounds good. 1 pound. So that's it for my fermentables for this recipe. Yours might be different. They're probably going to be different. And that's fine. So just add your fermentables here. It shows you the percent of the total fermentables this particular fermentable is. I'll give you estimates on pre-boil gravity, original gravity. These could be pretty far off from yours, depending on your system profile. I know mine are. I usually get much higher efficiencies than estimated here. And that just comes down to me not making this profile, right? I have to edit it. So I'm going to go into hops to continue this. My first hop addition is going to be 1 ounce of Hallertau Mittelfrühe at 4% alpha acids, which you can edit here. It should say on your hops packet, or however you get the hops. You can choose what kind of hops. I have pellet hops, but you could be using any of these. This is going to be 1 ounce. Whoops, I have to edit that. I'm going to do 1 ounce, which you can see here, and I'm going to put it in at 60 minutes. This is the amount of time it boils in the boil. It's going to boil for 1 full hour. You can also change if you want to add it in the boil, a dry hop, hop sand, mash, first wort, etc. So I'll save that. Excuse me. I'm going to add another ounce of Hallertau Mittelfrühe. Except this ounce, I'm going to dry hop. I've never dry hopped before. I'm definitely not going to dry hop for 60 days. I'm going to dry hop for 3 days. Never dry hop before. This is totally new for me. So I guess we're in the same boat here. You and I, whoever's watching this. So I'll say this 1 ounce of Hallertau Mittelfrühe, 4% alpha acids, dry hop for 3 days. And I have some other miscellaneous stuff to add. This being an orange wit beer, I'm going to add, well, orange peels. I have no idea which orange peel I'm adding. This is the first time I'm making this. I just found some oranges at the grocery store, so I assume they're sweet oranges. I've never seen the spice screen before. So we can learn together. I'm going to add 25 grams of orange peel at 5 minutes in the boil. So I can leave that as is. And I think this is 25 ounces or 25 grams dry. I'm using fresh orange peel, so we'll see how that estimation goes. I'm just gonna wing it. I have a few others here. I'm gonna add coriander seeds. Actually, I still have to go to the store and get these, but it'll be 15 grams, also at 5 minutes in the boil. So I'll save that. You can see it populate down here. And then I'm going to add some yeast nutrient to the end of the boil as well. I use about 1 gram per gallon, and my final volume is going to be about 5.5 gallons. So 5.5 grams is good. So I'll save that. I'll go over here to my yeast, and I'm going to add my yeast. Your yeast could be different, but the yeast I've been harvesting and recultivating over and over has been Y yeast, 2565 Kolsch yeast. Been doing pretty good for me. I've also used Kvike yeast with some pretty good success. I think that was Lutra Kvike. But this is the one I'm using. I've had this one around for a while. I think this will be the 7th generation of this yeast. Your yeast could be different. You'd be using out of a packet or whatnot. I just call it one package. Probably should be doing this billion cells thing. There's an estimation you can use. But if anybody wants, I can cite some sources on where I got my information on how to estimate number of yeast cells. I got it from a Brewlosophy video. So I'll just add this Kolsch yeast exactly how it is. You can edit your mash profile temperatures and stuff. I just usually leave this stock, and I try to keep this pretty close as best I can. Nothing's insulated. I brew outside, so this will fluctuate, and I brew with gas. So I turn the gas off so I don't burn the mash. But this will fluctuate for me, and that's fine. If yours fluctuates too, I've been making good beer, so I don't think this matters too much, especially over the course of 60 minutes. I keg, so I have this forced carbonation thing. Primary fermentation estimates 68% Fahrenheit. This will be better sourced from your yeast product description sheet. 14 days is pretty long for this yeast. I've been having about 7 days for any ale yeast. It's been about 7 days in my closet, no temperature control. Just let it sit and rip. Use your water profile to show you how much to use for the mash, the sparge, how much total water, and the mash volume, water plus grain. I end up having to use a little bit more water in this, and that comes from my equipment profile from above. But you'll see how I fix this with my 3 vessel system later. I think you can also add your brewing salts somewhere, but I don't brew with salt. I just take it straight from the tap, and that's been working pretty good for me so far. So I believe this is it for this recipe. You can add a picture here. Some people put a style in here, if it's even in here. Sure. I'll throw the style in here anyway. And it shows you how closely your estimated values for your beer, how closely they align to the prescribed style values. If you're just home brewing for fun, like I am, this doesn't matter to you at all, unless you're really trying to go for something. Well, it matters as much as you make it matter. I think that's about it for the recipe. So, you could delete the recipe here if you get sick of it. You can duplicate it, export, share, print, read mode, which just puts it in a big line like you'd see other people's recipes. This is good for screenshots or something if you want to put this on social media or share it any other way. It automatically saves because this is a website portal, so you could just close it and it'll automatically save. If you want to set it to public or private, you can. I guess you need premium for this. So you can close it out, or you can click brew and you can start your brew day. This is batch number 8, batch notes, recipe version 1, that's fine. Who you are here, which is also in the author if you made your own recipe. If you're planning on brewing this later, you can edit the date. I keep track of my batch numbers just for my personal reasons, but if this doesn't matter to you, then it doesn't matter to you. Then you can create batch. And this is the section where you can go and check to make sure you have your red wheat malt, your Pilsner, your flaked oats, and everything. You can see how much water you need, etc. Once you have everything checked off, then you can go to the brewing tab, change status to brewing, and start brewing. Once you've finished brewing and you have it in the fermenter, you can click to the fermenting tab, click status to fermenting. You can track your fermenting here. If you have the pro version, you can, I think you need to directly import digital readings from other devices, external devices like the tilt hydrometer and other things. I don't know the full list, but there's a whole bunch of other stuff that you can plug into here through the web app. Here's all your numbers from your brew day that you can import into the batch, and then when you're done, you complete it, and then you can rate it, put tasting notes, etc. But while we're brewing, well, first we're gonna make sure we have everything, which I still have to go get the coriander seeds. But once I make sure I have everything, I'm gonna switch this to brewing. I'm gonna change status to brewing, start the mash tracker, and then I'm gonna take measurements throughout this brew process, where I can change these measured values. I don't have a pH meter. I cannot measure acidity, but if you do, you can input that here. You change volumes. If your actual boil volume was something different, you put that in here. You're gonna measure specific gravity of the wort before and after the boil, and everything else in here. And that will automatically calculate your efficiencies at the end of the day. At the end of the brew day, it'll automatically calculate your efficiencies. These are projected values in white and what you got here in the green. I will see you after I get my coriander seeds and start brewing, but you won't see this screen again. These are the 3 vessels that I use, hence the 3 vessel system naming. We have the hot liquor tank, we have the mash tun, and we have the boil kettle here. The hot liquor tank is just a big pot, nothing's in it. I'm going to clean this out really good before I start to brew. I usually just give it a good rinse. I don't use soap and water because that takes some more water to rinse. It's a big pot. It's got a spout on the bottom. That you'll see what I use it for later. This particular one is 15 gallons. Well, just over 14. You want a little bit more. This vessel will be holding the most amount of water out of any of the vessels. And so this one should have the capacity for all the water you're going to brew. Moving to the mash tun here, this also has a spout on the bottom, but on the inside, it has this false bottom, and this straw fits in a circle. This is a pretty basic mash tun setup. There's a lot more fancy ones you can get. Made out of coolers and stuff that are insulated. This one's metal, so I don't have to worry about plastics leaching into the beer or anything, but I don't think you really would with a cooler style mash tun either. This is where the grain and water mixture goes to convert the starches into sugars. The false bottom is so you don't get a whole lot of grain coming out the bottom, out the spout when you pour it out. And we'll go over that process later. This is the brew kettle, or the boil kettle, I should say. This is where the boil happens. So all the water from rinsing the grain comes into here. I bring it to a boil, and then I put in the hops and such. The orange whip beer, I'm also going to throw the orange peels in here too. I have this is called a hop spider. It's just a big deep strainer where I throw the hops into because I don't have a whirlpool arm. So this is the most cost-effective way for me, someone who brews semi-frequently, to separate the hops from the wort. After the boil, I don't want all the hop matter to come out and into the fermenter. Also, with the boil kettle is this guy. This is my copper coil cooler. I'll hook one end up to it to a hose, and then I'll water some plants with the other end. And this will cool down the wort so I can put it in my plastic fermenter. If you have a stainless steel fermenter or something like that, you can pour boiling wort into it and sanitize it that way. And that's fine, but I don't have that right now. So I'm using this guy. Some people, I think, leave the lid on it all night and let it cool down that way. I think you're risking more exposure to bacteria when you do that, especially in this particular one because I have such a large gap here. So I like to cool it down and get it in the sanitized fermenter as fast as possible. None of these vessels need to be sanitized as stringently as the fermenter will. They do need to be clean, but excuse me, because we boil in this one, any microbes that get into here get killed in the boil. So this needs to be cleaned but not sanitized. This needs to be cleaned but not sanitized. This needs to be cleaned and will get sanitized during the boil. And we will also throw in the hop spider and the coil in the boil kettle during the boil to sanitize those as well. But these are the three vessels. I'm going to clean these out, and I'll see you in a bit. So you're probably looking at this earlier and saying, hey, that's pretty clean. Why are you cleaning it again? It's because sometimes some stuff falls in here while they're sitting in storage. Like whatever the heck that is. And I clean them after I brew. But this just makes sure that they're extra clean right before I start to brew. Something could happen to them in storage, etc. So this is what I'm working with here. I got my hot liquor tank on the propane burner, and that's up on the porch, and that's to give it some height. I don't have pumps or anything, nor do I have a brewing sculpture. So I have to do it like this. You could use a table, something sturdy like a picnic table or big picnic table made out of wood or something. Or you could build a brew sculpture, or you get pumps. But I don't have any of those things. So this is what I use. This is my mash tun underneath, where the grains are going to go into, and this is just going to be water. If you notice from the Brewfather sheet, the total water used was about 7.5 gallons, and that's minimum. That's a minimum value. You kind of want to overshoot that in your hot liquor tank, because if you run on hot water, you're kind of screwed a little bit. So usually I fill this up to 10 gallons or so, up from 7.5. You can see that my kettle has graduations here, and that's what I use to measure the volume of water. I'm going to dose out the water in the prescribed amounts into the mash tun here, and then while it's mashing, I'm probably going to have to lift it up and put it on the propane burner, because it's uninsulated. I'm going to lose heat out of it, and to maintain heat, I'm going to have to put heat into it. This is a propane setup. Propane is, I'm not going to say relatively safe, but it is culturally accepted in the US. A lot of people know how to be safe with propane. This still is a compressed liquid gas that is flammable, so exercise caution when you're using this. Don't put it underneath a tree or anything. Keep flammable materials away from it. You have been warned. If you hurt yourself, it's not my fault, but exhibit caution. This is a very high-powered propane burner that I'm using here. I think this is, I can't remember how many BTUs this is, but it's a lot. It's probably the biggest the biggest one I could find for cheap. You can see how big that burner is there. A lot of heat coming off of this thing. So use at your own risk. There's other options available. You don't have to use propane. There's electric boil systems out there. Steam, I think, is another option, but that's more industrial. And that comes with its own risks as well. Same with electricity, especially, well, any electricity. I don't think people take 110 seriously enough. But exhibit caution. All right, I just filled her up. You can see we got just over 10 gallons, maybe closer to 10.5, but that's fine. More is okay in the hot liquor tank. So now I'm going to turn on the propane burner. Brewfather says to get this up to 165. I found that as I pour this into the mash tun, it cools down a little bit in the process. So I've been heating it to about 180 or so. You don't want to heat it too much. You don't want to pour boiling water into your mash tun, because you'll cook the enzyme necessary to break down the starches and the sugars. But I've been slowly cranking this up a little bit, and that's due to my heat losses in between. This sucker is heavy. 10 gallons of water at 8 gallons a pound is about 80 pounds. You don't want to move this too often if you don't have to. You can, but especially when it's hot, it starts to splash all over the place, even with the lid on it. And 80 pounds of hot water splashing on you is not fun. I use one of those laser thermometers to track the temperature. Some brew stores sell a really deep thermometer that you can clip onto the side, and you can measure it that way. Or this brew kettle is equipped with a thermo well, so you can put a thermometer directly into here, which I probably will do at some point to all of my vessels. Maybe not my, maybe not the boil kettle, but definitely I'd want that on this and here for more accurate temperature. But those are expensive, and the laser's doing fine for now. So I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing, and I will talk to you guys in the next step. All right, we got the hot liquor tank heated up. It's currently about 175 degrees. And now, before we start putting water from the hot liquor tank into the mash tun, we're going to make sure that the valve at the bottom of the mash tun is closed so we don't spray hot water all over the place. I got my mash paddle already in the mash tun. I think Brewfather wanted 3.5 gallons. So I'm going to slowly put in the 3.5 gallons. And at the same time, I'm just slowly going to feed in my grains. I got my wheat malt and my Pilsner malt and my flaked oats right here. I'm going to slowly feed those in, mixing as I go. Make sure there's no dough balls. Feed some in. Oh, down a minute. Some malt in there. We're gonna mix it up, make sure there's no dough balls. And we're gonna keep doing this until we get 3.5 gallons from the hot liquor tank into here and all the grain put in. Got a big dough ball right there. Keep going until it's a nice soupy mix. Brewfather says 3 gallons. We started at 10, now we're at 9, so we got 2 more gallons to go. We're gonna keep putting in more water and more grain. All right, we're at 7 gallons, so it's 3 gallons of water in the mash tun. I got all the grains in here, all the oats, the wheat, and the barley malt. So this might take 2 hands, but I'm gonna mix this up. I'm gonna take the laser and shoot it in there. It's pretty good temperature. Once it gets to, I don't know, in the 130s, usually I heat it back up. But the foam masks the infrared from the laser temperature sensor, the laser thermometer. So you really got to mix it up and laser it. See, I'm hitting the foam now. That's 136, and we just hit like 140s, mid 140s somewhere. But that's the mash tun. This is mashing, so we can start our mash timer on Brewfather. If it chills down, I'm just going to heat it back up. Really low heat, and I'm going to be careful not to burn it and stir the whole time, because a burnt mash will result in a burnt flavored beer, and nobody likes burnt beer. So I will keep you updated as I keep going. All right, it's been an hour. So I moved the mash tun up here. Held its temperature pretty well. It only dropped to about 135 or so. And now I got the boil kettle right below it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drain out the mash tun into the boil kettle. But first, I'm going to slowly recirculate it, catching the wort into this Pyrex. You want Pyrex like this. You want something that's heat resistant, because this stuff's pretty hot. If you use regular soda lime glass, it could crack. So I'm going to set you up, or I'm going to try to set you up, and then I'll show you what recirculation looks like. Alright, I got you set up. I'm going to take my Pyrex, hold it underneath, crack it slowly. You see there's a lot of grain in there swirling around. We don't want that getting into our boil kettle. So very slowly So the grain bed settles and forms a nice natural filter for us. It's about full, so I'm going to lift it up, slowly drain it back into the mash tun very carefully so as to not disturb the grain bed. That natural filter we're trying so hard to achieve here. And this process usually takes quite a while. I mean, with this small little pint-sized Pyrex, I probably do this 10 times or so. But this is the process. You go a little faster as it settles more. If it does stop coming out, if it gets too clogged, you can take a hose and spray it right back in it with the valve open. You want to be ready to close the valve again and have the Pyrex underneath it when you do that, because it'll come back rushing out. Hose water is fine because it's not boiled yet, so it's not yet sanitized and sterilized. And just underneath the spout here, I do have my hop spider, the fine mesh, to catch any grain that would make its way through the grain bed. So once it's running pretty clear out of the Pyrex, I'll just open this guy up and let it drain all the way down into the boil kettle. Once I get that done, I'll show you what sparging looks like. Alright, got the recirculation mostly done. There's a little bit of grain left, but I think it's okay. That's what this guy is for. You want to rinse this guy out before the boil, just so you're not boiling the grain. I pulled out the mash paddle, so I have more room in here when I do everything. That recirculation process I was just doing is also called Vorlofting, or the Vorlauf. It's the German term for it. But now that we have the grain bed settled, we can slowly crack this open. Scoot that guy over a little bit. You want this fairly slow. So as this is draining, the liquid level inside the mash tun is going to drop. So the 3 gallons of total water we put in here is obviously not enough for a 5-gallon batch, especially after water absorption of the grains. So I've been heating up the hot liquor tank some more. Brewfather I think says, or Brewfather I think says 170 degree, but I'm going a little hotter and just slowly doing it over time. Slowly sparging. Sparging is rinsing the grain, putting clean water over top the grains. This is going down a little bit. I'll probably scooch this a little, very carefully, a little bit over the edge, a little bit more, so I can slow this down. That's a little fast. We want this nice and slow so we have time to rinse the grain with the nice clean hot liquor, the hot water. You could scoop it out of the hot liquor tank and slowly pour it over with the Pyrex measuring cup. If you had pumps, you could run the pump really slow and slowly rinse the grain. But I don't have pumps. Or if you had a gravity fed, you could do that too. But I'm a little bit off on the height here, so I'm just gonna scoop it over by hand. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the lid off. That's hot. Take the lid off. Take my Pyrex cup. Scoop out some hot water. And I'm gonna slowly drizzle it in, rinsing the grains, trying hard not to disturb the grain bed, that natural filter. So I'm gonna keep doing this until Brewfather has a prescribed volume. based on my brewing equipment profile. But I keep going until I hit just over 7 gallons. So that keeps my pre-boil volume where it is, because especially with the propane burner, it boils pretty aggressively and I lose a lot of liquid to evaporation. So I'll probably shoot a little video of maybe I'll just show you right now. You can see the grain, the surface of the grain bed right there. So I'm going to scoop up another pint of hot liquor, and I'm going to rinse it in. I'm leaving the heat on the hot liquor tank. So I got a little bit of flame in there. So as I keep scooping water out, it's going to retain its heat and probably even get hotter. And then the grain's gonna get hotter, and it's gonna. I think it kind of simulates a mash out. Probably not really, but at this point, after the starch conversion that we did over the last hour, it's not really imperative because we're about to boil it anyway. So I keep the heat on it a little bit. As you can see, it's draining even slower now. So I got to get on the sparge, and I'll come back when I start the boil. One thing I'm not sure if I mentioned enough is the enzyme that actually converts the starch into the sugars. So when you take a barley berry or a wheat berry and you let it grow a little bit, you let it germinate, and then you heat kill it, that little baby plant has begun to produce an enzyme called, I think it's maltase. And what it does is it breaks down the starches into sugars. And that enzyme operates at a certain temperature. Obviously it can run at room temperature, but if you heat it up a little bit, it can run a little bit faster. But there's a threshold. You can overcook maltase, and I think it's somewhere in the 160-ish degree Fahrenheit. So I think it's high 160s. At 170 is definitely way. You'll denature the enzyme, and when you denature the enzyme or heat cook it, it won't work anymore. So that's why the temperature of the mash is fairly critical. Also, during a 60-minute mash, I'm not sure if this matters too much. I think the research is still out on that, but 60-minute mash is a traditional amount of time. But if you mash at a higher temperature, like 155 or something like that, 157, and you hold it there throughout the entire length of time, you'll have less fermentable sugars, and your beer will turn out a little bit sweeter. Fermentable sugars are a lot shorter than infermentable sugars, and the yeast can't eat the longer chain sugars, like starch, for example, or more complex sugars. That takes them longer amounts of time, and it's harder for them to process. And if you mash at a lower temperature, kind of like what I did with my uninsulated, non-temperature regulated mash tun, you'll end up with more fermentable sugars, resulting in a drier beer and a higher ABV by comparison to a mash done at a higher temperature. So that's a little bit of the science, biology behind it. But this next part, the boil, is a little bit of a departure from that, because that's more of a chemical process with hops isomerization and the other reactions. I think they're Maillard reactions that happen when you actually cook something. When you boil beer, you cook it, or if you boil the wort, you cook it. I'm making the wort. The yeast make the beer, but I'm just making their food. And yeah, I'm just gonna continue this, pouring hot water in it over top the mash. or what's left of the mash here. Trying hard not to disturb the grain bed. And I'm gonna stop when I get a little over 7 gallons. So see you then. All right, last sparge intervention here, but you don't have to continue with sparge like I'm doing. You could alternatively just pour in the remaining amount of volume, or in a couple of batches, and that's called batch sparging. But when you do that, you have to recirculate and reset the grain bed, because just taking this and dumping a couple of gallons in here is going to disturb this delicate grain bed. But it is possible. I just do it this way because why not? It's all going to come out around this speed anyway, with how slow I got it going. So I thought I'd mention batch sparging, because that's another viable alternative of rinsing the grain, or sparging. All right, there we go in our boil kettle, just a little over 7 gallons. I rinsed out the hop spider, put it back in there. For the boil, you do want to keep the lid off the whole time. You want volatile compounds left over in the malts to be blown off into the atmosphere. It's like sulfur compounds and other stuff. Really, you want the lid off the entire time throughout the brewing process until after the boil. After the boil, I'm going to put the lid back on just to keep it a little more sanitized and safe in the environment while it's cooling down. But in the meantime, I'm left with all this spent grain, so I'm going to take this whole thing and flip it upside down in my compost bin. I think I've heard people mention that you use this stuff for chicken feed. You definitely cook with this. It's just grain without the sugar. But you don't want to just walk away from the boil kettle while you got the heat on it, because right when it starts to boil, that's what's called the hot break, where a lot of proteins are formed, and these proteins can start developing a foam, and you could very easily boil over the brew kettle. So you want to keep an eye on this. I like to save time by cleaning this out. I have another beer in the closet that just finished fermenting, so I'll probably throw that in a keg, so I can then pitch this wort right on top of the yeast. And you'll see that after it's cooled down and everything. But in the meantime, we're just gonna wait for some bubbles. Good rolling boil. So before this reaches a full boil, I should have done this earlier, but I'm going to mix this up a little bit. And I'm going to take a sample to read the specific gravity. This has to cool down, so I'm going to set that aside. And I'm just going to keep waiting for it to boil. I'll go over how to do the specific gravity measurement later, but that does have to cool down quite a bit first. So here I am measuring the specific gravity of the pre-boil. I'm going to do this with the post-boil as well, but I thought I'd show you what this looks like. This is a hydrometer kit. It's just a long, skinny... It would be a graduated cylinder if it was graduated, but this is just basically a really long tube. And then you have this calibrated weight set up here, and there's a couple of scales on it, but this scale right here with the 3 decimal places is specific gravity. 1.000 being the specific gravity of water. The wort having water and a little bit of sugar in it should make this a little bit more dense than water. So any number above 1 is more dense than water, and vice versa. So as you can see here, it's maybe just a shy. That's right about 1030. 1.030. So we take that measurement and then we put it in a Brewfather. this is the pre-boil volume, or the pre-boil specific gravity. You really only record this if you care about efficiencies. I do because I'm curious, and why not? But if you want to record ABV, you're going to want to do this after the boil because you're going to lose volume, making your sugar solution more dense, more highly packed with sugars. And then you're going to test it again after the ferment as well. I have a digital tilt hydrometer that I use in the fermenter, which is pretty cool. And that'll tell me the specific gravity as the ferment goes on. It's a little spendy, but I got it for Christmas, so I'll use it. Anyway, this is how to test the gravity of your beer, or wort in this case. This is the pre-boil. You do this again before the boil, after the boil, and after the ferment. All right, burner's been on full blast for a while, and you can see it's just now starting to boil. Hot break's coming soon. Well, it's actively happening right now. See, it's going to start foaming up really bad, and then we're going to have to turn down the heat a little bit so it doesn't boil over. If this were just unattended anywhere, electric, gas, steam heated brew houses, this does have a good chance of boiling over. This happens regardless of the heat source. Yeah, there's our boil starting here. And now the hot break. There it is. So I turned it down way low. It's almost off, just so I don't have to relight that hot flame. Well, the metal's hot. I don't want to stick my hand in there. And then it's gonna come down into a nice, good rolling boil, which is exactly what we want. So now that we got the boil started, I'm gonna go in the house, grab the pre-measured 1 ounce of Hallertau Mittelfrühe hops, throw that in here, and then I'm gonna start the boil timer. And now it's time for my 5-minute additions, none of which are hops. Your recipe may vary. I got orange peel, coriander seeds, and then some yeast newt thrown there. Specifically, I think it's Fermade K, yeast nutrient. I might give that a little shake. But another 5 minutes, and then it's the end of the boil. All right, that's the end of the boil. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna kill the gas. Whoops. Kill the gas, and I'm gonna pick this guy up and throw the coil in there. I'm gonna use the oven mitt to handle the hop spider because, well, it was just sitting in boiling water. So I'm gonna do that while it's still hot, so the coil gets sanitized in the heat. Now, as you can see, I got the coil in here, I got the lid on, and that's the hop spider right in there. I leave it in. I think some people take it out, but I leave it in there. The coil's been sitting in there for maybe a minute or two, and yeah, it's pretty hot to the touch. So I got it hooked up. Got the other end hooked up to a hose here, and the other end is gonna water this lemon tree. So very slowly, I'm gonna open this hose valve. Come on, there we go. Now it's starting to go. Pushing the air out of it. And there we go. I like to keep the rate really slow because then it transfers all the heat to the water. You go faster and you can probably cool down faster, but I like to go slow. Seems on the water a little bit. And this tree can handle it. This tree can handle that little bit of heat. Does make this line really pliable though. And now we're cooling down. That is insanely hot. But yeah, now we're cooling down. You can put a piece of tinfoil on here if you want to. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Usually I do. But while this is cooling down, I'm gonna get the beer out of my fermenter, put that in a keg. And then once this is cold in about, I don't know, maybe 40 minutes or so, I'll just pitch this right on top of the yeast. I'm not even gonna clean the fermenter. All right, it's done cooling down. It's about 70 degrees now. It just needs to be cooled down enough so the yeast aren't shocked or so they don't die. It doesn't matter if you have a stainless steel fermenter, but I don't. But with a stainless steel fermenter, you can literally pour boiling hot wort directly into it, and then just let it sit overnight. This is plastic, so it would probably deform, melt, leach chemicals into it or whatever. I just took a previous beer out of this, so I left the yeast in there. I'm going to reuse the same yeast. I'm going to make sure that valve is off, which it is. Because the beer was just in here, it is sanitized. The lid's on here pretty tight, but I cracked it for the video. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the lid off. I'm going to have to re-sanitize the lid. But with the lid off, I'm going to start pouring the wort in there. That's my tilt hydrometer inside the wort there. And you want it to splash around. You want to introduce oxygen for the yeast to be able to eat, especially at the beginning of a new fermentation. It helps it replicate and build a strong culture so it can resist other smaller infections. Because while this is sanitized, it's not pristine, sterilized. I mean, I'm sure there's a couple of other microbes in here, but they're so small, they're negligible. You want the yeast to be the dominant culture in here, if not the only culture in here. And a lot of good, healthy yeast helps prevent anything else from growing. So I'm going to keep draining it just like this for a while. Make sure that all of the wort we just made throughout the entire day actually makes it in here. So after that, the lid's I'm gonna sterilize or sanitize the lid with my my spray bottle of Star San I got here, because this is after the hot side. Everything has to be sanitized. I mean, the lid didn't get boiled with the rest of it. So I'm gonna flip it over. Oh, there's the yeast culture. Maybe I'll clean that off before I sanitize it. But after it gets sanitized, I'm going to fill this up to the line. Well, after I sanitize, I'm going to put the lid on it, and then I'm going to put the airlock on it, filling it up to the line. Of course, after I take a gravity sample, I like to wait until after it's in the fermenter, because being chilled slowly in the kettle, it can stratify. So what that means is, like, the heaviest sugars can settle on the bottom, and it'll build layers of heavy, medium light, and light liquid layers. So you might pull a sample off at the very beginning or at the very end, and it could be really heavy or really light from what you were expecting. And I think this prevents that, especially because after this, I'm also going to put the lid on, shake the crap out of it, and introduce more oxygen into the liquid. But that's pretty much the end of the brew day after this. I hope this helps out anyone brewing on a 3-vessel system using very primitive, not even a brew sculpture, just one step. What is this, like 2 feet? 2 feet tall step. You don't need a brew sculpture. You don't need pumps or anything. You just need 3 pots. I tried with 2 pots. It is not. It's not easy with only 2, but you need at least 3 pots. Associated equipment like this, the cooler, the spider or whirlpool arm. I think you could also stir it, and then maybe you don't need a whirlpool arm. I haven't experimented on that. But you don't need much to brew. It's more an art form than a science. I mean, this is my way, but it could vary for you, and it could vary for many other people. But this is how I do it, and I hope this whole thing helps somebody out.